When my ex-husband walked into that hospital carrying his daughter in his arms and saw me sitting in the waiting room, he laughed in my face and asked, "Where is that defective son of yours? Did he finally kick the bucket?" He was useless as ever. He didn't know that the chief of medicine, who was about to save his daughter's life, was exactly that same child he had kicked out of the house 18 years ago. Before I start telling you this story that still makes my heart race, tell me one thing in the comments. From which state or country are you watching me right now? I was sitting there in the cold reception area of the County General Hospital, leafing through an old magazine without paying attention to the words, when I heard that voice. That voice I hadn't heard in almost 2 decades, but which still managed to turn my stomach. It was Richard, my ex-husband, the man who shattered me into pieces when I needed him most. He came through the automatic sliding doors carrying a girl of about 12 inches his arms. The kid was pale, sweating, cold, clearly very sick. He was shouting for help, desperate, demanding immediate attention, just as he had always done with everything in life. Richard never asked for anything with a please. He always demanded. He always believed he had the right to have everything the moment he felt like it. Our eyes met purely by chance as he ran past the reception desk. It took him about 3 seconds to recognize me. I saw the exact moment the penny dropped. His eyes widened like saucers. His mouth went a little slack, and then that crooked, malicious smile I knew so well appeared. That smile he always wore right before spewing poison. The nurse took the girl from his arms to rush her into the ER, and he stayed there standing, glaring at me. I didn't lower my gaze. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me weak again. At 63 years old, I had learned that looking fear in the eye is the only way to beat it. "Well, well, well," he said, walking toward me with that swagger of a bully that time hadn't managed to erase. It only made him look pathetic. "If it isn't Linda, what a surprise finding you here. Working as a janitor in the hospital now, huh? I always knew you'd end up like this." I took a deep breath. I wasn't going to let him get to me. "I'm just waiting for someone," I replied calmly, looking back at the magazine. "Waiting for who? That son of yours with problems?" He let out a bitter laugh. "By the way, tell me one thing I've always been curious about. Is that defective boy you insisted on raising still alive? Or did nature finally do the job you should have done and put him in a place where he wouldn't burden anyone?" His words echoed in the reception area. Some people looked up, shocked by such cruelty. I closed the magazine slowly, placed it on my lap, and looked him straight in the eye. I didn't feel rage or resentment. I only had a quiet certainty that this man was about to receive the lesson of his life. But before I tell you what happened in that hospital, I need to turn back time. I need you to see who the Linda of 25 years ago was, so you can understand the depth of the hole this guy threw me into. You have to know the fragile woman who believed his promises, who held his hand when he swore eternal love, who carried his son in her womb, thinking she was building a family. I met Richard when I was 26. I was an administrative assistant at an accounting firm, and he was the new sales manager, just transferred from Chicago, full of grandiose plans and smooth talk. He had that big city charm. He talked about trips abroad, brand new cars, fancy restaurants. For a small-town girl like me, who had never left the state, it all seemed like a fairy tale. He courted me in a way I had never experienced. Flowers sent to the office, dinners at incredibly expensive steakhouses, promises of a queen's life by his side. He told me I was special, different from the others, that he had chosen me over all the women chasing after him. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. We got married after 6 months of dating. It was a beautiful wedding with over 200 guests in a ballroom filled with imported flowers that cost an arm and a leg. I wore a white dress that looked like a princess gown with a 10-foot train. In the photos from that day, my smile was real. My eyes shone with hope. I truly believed I had found the love of my life. The first few months were fine. Richard worked a lot, made good money, and I quit my job to take care of the house as he requested. He said his wife had no reason to work, that it would be a sign he was failing as a provider. Back then, it seemed romantic, but later I understood it was pure control. He wanted me to depend totally on him. The pregnancy came in our 2nd year of marriage. When I took the test and saw those 2 pink lines, I cried with happiness. I ran to tell Richard when he got home from work, and he lifted me in his arms, spinning me around the living room. "We're gonna have a son, my heir," he shouted, going crazy with joy. He was already talking about teaching the kid football, getting him into the best private schools, making him a champion. The months of pregnancy were intense. Richard kept me on a short leash with everything: what I ate, how much weight I gained, if I was doing the right exercises. He bought books on pregnancy and child development. He insisted on going to every doctor's appointment. He wanted to control every detail. I thought it was concern, that he was being a dedicated dad. I didn't realize it was an obsession with perfection. I remember clearly the last consultation before the delivery. The doctor did a routine ultrasound and stared at the screen longer than normal. He called another colleague to take a look. They spoke in hushed tones, pointing at things on the image I didn't understand at all. My heart started racing. "Is there a problem, doctor?" I asked with a trembling voice. He turned to us with that somber face doctors put on when they're about to deliver bad news. "We've identified some markers that may indicate a genetic condition. Nothing that puts the baby's life at immediate risk, but it is important that you are prepared. The baby may be born with Down syndrome." The office fell silent. I looked at Richard, seeking support, expecting him to grab my hand and tell me everything would be okay, that we would face whatever it was together. But what I saw on his face chilled my blood. It was disgust, it was anger, it was rejection. "That has to be wrong," he said, standing up from the chair abruptly. "Run the test again. This cannot be happening to me." The doctor tried to explain that it was just a possibility, that we needed more tests to confirm, and that even if confirmed, children with Down syndrome could lead full and happy lives. Richard didn't want to hear any of it. He stormed out of the office, slamming the door. I stayed there, sitting with my hands on my belly, feeling my baby move, and I broke down crying. It wasn't fear of the syndrome, it was fear of my husband's reaction. I already knew Richard well enough to know that perfection was everything to him, and a child with special needs did not fit into the perfect plan he had drafted. The following weeks were a silent hell. Richard barely spoke a word to me. He came home late, smelling of alcohol and cheap perfume. When I tried to talk about the baby, about preparing for anything, he cut me off sharply. "I don't want to talk about that," he'd say, locking himself in his home office. I gave birth on a Tuesday afternoon. It was fast, intense, terrifying. Richard was there, but it seemed like his mind was elsewhere, as if he preferred to be anywhere but there. When the doctor lifted my baby and I heard that strong, healthy cry, my heart exploded with love. It was a boy, my Ethan. The nurse cleaned him up quickly and brought him to me so I could see him. He was beautiful, with his almond-shaped eyes, his small, flat nose, those characteristic features. I knew what that meant, but I didn't give a damn. He was my son. He was perfect. He was mine. "Hi, my love," I whispered, kissing his little forehead. "Mommy loves you so much." I looked at Richard, expecting to see on his face at least a spark of what I was feeling, but what I saw was worse than indifference. It was revulsion. He looked at our son as if he were looking at something disgusting. "I am not going to raise that," he said quietly, but firmly enough for me to hear every word. "That is not my son." The nurses tried to hide their embarrassment. One of them took Ethan from my arms, saying she was going to do the initial checks, but I knew it was to give me a moment with Richard. I was exhausted, in pain, confused, but I still tried to believe he was just in shock, that he would get over it. "Richard, please," I said, reaching out my hand. "He's our son. He needs us." He took a step back, as if my touch would burn him. "He is not my son, Linda. I made it very clear the kind of son I wanted. That thing there," he pointed to the bassinet where the nurse was tending to Ethan, "that thing is a mistake, a factory defect." His words felt like stab wounds. Every syllable opened a new gash in my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to beat him until he understood he was talking about our baby, an innocent life that had just arrived in the world. But I was too weak, too tired, too broken. "Get out," I said, turning my face away. "If you can't love your own son, then get out." And he left. He walked out of that delivery room and the maternity ward without looking back. I stayed there alone, crying in silence while the nurse brought Ethan back to me. She placed him in my lap without saying a word. She just squeezed my shoulder with affection, as if saying, "You can handle this." I looked at that small face, those eyes barely opening, those little hands opening and closing, looking for something to hold on to. And in that moment, I made the most important decision of my life. If I had to choose between that man and this baby, I chose my son. Always. The first days at home were devastating. Richard came back only to pack clothes. He said he was moving into an apartment near his office, that he needed space to think. But we both knew that was the end. He was abandoning me because the son wasn't perfect enough for his ego. "You can keep the house for now," he said while packing a suitcase. "But don't think I'm going to support this kid forever. When the divorce goes through, you're going to have to scratch out a living on your own." I was sitting on the sofa with Ethan asleep in my arms. I didn't even get up to watch him leave. I just hugged my baby tighter and thought, we're going to make it. I don't know how, but we're going to make it. Reality hit me hard in the following weeks. I had no job, no savings worth mentioning, no family nearby to lend a hand. My parents had died in a car accident 5 years earlier, and I was an only child. Richard's family? They vanished into thin air as soon as they found out about Ethan. His mother, who was always so sweet to me when we got married, stopped answering the phone. Ethan needed constant medical follow-ups. Babies with Down syndrome have a higher risk of heart problems, respiratory issues, hearing problems. They need physical therapy from a young age to build muscle strength, speech therapy to help with talking, occupational therapy to stimulate development. All of that cost money I didn't have. I started selling things from the house. First went the jewelry Richard had given me while dating and married. Then went the electronics, the expensive living room furniture, even designer clothes I never wore. Every dollar counted. Every cent was important to ensure my son lacked nothing. The divorce was fast and cruel. Richard hired a shark of a lawyer who did everything to prove I was a negligent mother, that I had hidden information about the baby's health during the pregnancy, that I was trying to extort him. I didn't have the means to pay for a lawyer just as vicious. I accepted the deal he offered. I kept the house for 2 years, but then I had to sell it and split the money with him. There was no alimony because he alleged that Ethan was not capable of utilizing the money in a productive manner. The judge, unfortunately, bought the story. When Ethan turned 6 months old, I had to go back to work. I got a job cleaning an office building downtown. The shift was from 6 p.m. to 12 a.m. I left Ethan with a neighbor who charged me a cheap rate to watch him. It wasn't ideal, but it was what I could afford. My routine was grueling. I woke up at 5 a.m. with Ethan, bathed him, did the exercises at home that the therapist from the community health center taught me, played with him, stimulated him. At 3 p.m. I slept a little while he also took a nap. At 5:30 p.m. I dropped him off with the neighbor and went to work. I got back at 12:30 at night, picked him up asleep, arrived home dead tired, but I always gave him a kiss on his little forehead before sleeping. On weekends, I cleaned other people's houses to make ends meet. Ethan went with me, sleeping in his stroller while I scrubbed floors, cleaned bathrooms, ironed clothes. Some homeowners complained about me bringing him. They said it was unprofessional to bring children to work. I swallowed my tears and kept cleaning because I needed that money. But you know what was the most incredible thing of all? Ethan was a happy baby. Despite all the struggles, despite being slower in his development, he always smiled. When I arrived to pick him up from the neighbor, his little face would light up. He would reach out his little arms with that toothless smile that melted my heart. In those moments, I knew every bit of suffering was worth it. When he turned 1, he started showing progress I didn't even believe possible. The therapist said he was developing very well, that early intervention was working. He started sitting up by himself, then crawling. I cried with emotion at every new thing he achieved. It was around that time I met Dr. Rachel Stevens, a pediatrician specializing in child development, who started consulting at the neighborhood clinic. She examined Ethan during a routine checkup and was impressed with how attentive he was, how he reacted to everything. "Do you stimulate him at home, ma'am?" she asked. "I do everything the therapist teaches me," I replied. "I talk to him a lot. I read stories even though he's little. I play different music for him, teach him colors, textures," she smiled. "Keep it up. Ethan has enormous potential. Children with Down syndrome can achieve much more than people think, especially when people put in the effort from a young age." Those words gave me air to breathe. I started researching everything I could about child development, stimulation methods, special education. I went to the public library on my days off and spent hours reading, taking notes, learning. I was going to be the best mom that boy could have, even if I had to study until dawn after a whole day of hard labor. Ethan started speaking at 2 years old. They were simple words at first: mama, water, woof woof, when he saw a dog. But for me, every word was a monumental victory. I recorded him with the old cell phone. I had to watch it constantly and remember we were moving forward. At 3 years old, it was time to think about school. Private schools were unaffordable, and the public schools in the area didn't have the structure for inclusion. I knocked on dozens of doors, spoke to a bunch of principals. Some were honest and said they didn't know how to deal with special needs kids. Others just made up bureaucratic excuses not to accept the enrollment. That was when I met Miss Leslie, the principal of a small elementary school in the neighboring district. She heard my story, saw Ethan playing with blocks in her office, and said, "We welcome your son here. We don't have experience with Down syndrome, but we'll learn together." And boy, did they learn. Miss Leslie studied, trained the staff, adapted materials. Ethan blossomed in that place. Of course, there were problems. Some kids made mean comments. Some parents complained about him being there, but the school stood firm. It was at school where they started noticing something extraordinary about Ethan. He had an impressive photographic memory. At 4 years old, he memorized entire books after hearing them 2 or 3 times. At 5, he knew all the state capitals, all the flags, anthems. The science teacher fell over backward when he explained the water cycle with details that children his age didn't understand. "Linda," Miss Leslie called me into a meeting when Ethan was finishing kindergarten. "Your son is gifted. He's highly intelligent." I blinked, confused. "How?" "He has Down syndrome. It's rare, but possible," she explained. "It's called twice exceptional. Ethan has a genetic condition that affects some areas, but at the same time, he has intelligence far above average in others, especially memory, logic, and interest in science." That revelation completely changed how I saw Ethan's future. He wasn't just a child with special needs I had to help survive. He was a brilliant child with immense potential I had to nurture. I started looking for more advanced educational materials. I went to used bookstores to buy secondhand books on science, biology, anatomy. Ethan devoured everything. At 6 years old, he knew the names of every bone in the body. At 7, he understood basic physics and chemistry. At 8, he already said he wanted to be a doctor. "I want to help people, Mom," he told me with that voice that still struggled to pronounce some letters, but firm and sure. "I want to cure people." I looked at that little boy with his Down syndrome features, with his motor limitations, with his speech that still needed therapy, and I saw a giant. I saw a child who didn't let anything define him beyond his dreams. Elementary school entry was another challenge. Many teachers underestimated Ethan because of his appearance, because of how he spoke, because he was a bit clumsy when moving. In the first weeks, the math teacher called me in. "Mrs. Linda, I believe Ethan should be in a special education school," she told me with that tone of pity that infuriated me. "He won't be able to keep up with the group's pace." I took a deep breath, controlling my anger. "Teacher, with all due respect, did you give him any knowledge assessment before saying that?" "Well, not specifically, but due to his condition." "Then do it," I said sharply. "Evaluate what he truly knows, and then we'll talk about where he should be." She gave him the test and almost fell off her chair when she saw that Ethan got every question right, questions meant for kids 2 grades higher. Not only did he get them right, but he explained different ways to solve the problems. From that day on, the teachers started looking at Ethan with different eyes, not with pity, but with respect. Some still resisted. They kept thinking he shouldn't be there, but the majority recognized the talent my son had. Meanwhile, I kept working like crazy. I cleaned buildings, did housekeeping, did laundry for others on weekends, everything to pay for Ethan's therapies, supplies, the books he devoured. I aged fast those years. I got gray hair before 40. My body ached from so much scrubbing, my skin got spotted from fatigue. But every time I saw Ethan with a new book, with his eyes shining with curiosity, with that big smile telling me some scientific discovery, I knew it was worth breaking my back. And Richard vanished from our lives. He didn't call on a single birthday. He didn't send a Christmas gift. He didn't give a damn if his son was alive or dead. To him, we ceased to exist the day Ethan was born. I heard from mutual acquaintances that he had remarried, this time to a younger, better-looking woman, that they had a daughter, and that he showed the girl off all over social media. showing the world that now he did have the perfect family he always wanted. I won't lie to you, it hurt. It hurt to see that he could move on, make the life he wanted, while I scrambled alone to give our son the basics. But I didn't let that pain eat me alive. I had more important things to do, take care of Ethan and help him reach his dreams. When he turned 10, the school called me for another meeting. This time it was to talk about skipping him ahead. Ethan is way above his group's level, the principal explained. He's already mastered all the elementary content. We need to think about bigger challenges for him. So, at 10 years old, Ethan skipped 2 grades and went straight to middle school. He was the shortest and most different kid in the class, but also the smartest. The other students were weirded out at first. Some bullied him, said horrible things. But when they realized he explained the material better than the teacher, that he helped everyone on hard exams, he became like the hero of the classroom. In high school, Ethan had a clear goal: get into med school. He studied with a discipline I never saw in any teenager. He woke up at 5 a.m., studied until 7, went to school, came back at 6 p.m., and kept going until 11 at night. On weekends, he went to the library and spent the entire day there. I tried to convince him to rest a little, to go out with friends, to do normal kid stuff, but he looked at me with those determined eyes and said, "Mom, I need to prove I can. I need to show everyone that Down syndrome doesn't define me." The college admissions process was a battle. Not because Ethan couldn't handle it academically, he was more than capable, but because the world wasn't ready to accept a doctor with Down syndrome. We received calls from well-meaning counselors saying I was giving the boy false hope, that medicine was impossible for someone like him, that I should encourage him to look for something more suitable for his limitations. I listened to everything quietly, and then I looked at Ethan studying at the kitchen table, surrounded by biology and chemistry books, and I thought, to hell with the limitations they want to put on him. The day of the SATs, I walked him to the door of the testing center. He was nervous, sweating bullets, but determined. "I can do this, Mom," he said, more to himself than to me. "I'm gonna make it." And he did. When the results came out and his acceptance letter to one of the best state universities arrived, I fell to my knees and cried like never before. It wasn't tears of sadness or exhaustion, it was crying of gratitude, pride, victory. Ethan had achieved it against all odds, against all prejudices, against all the low expectations the world had of him. My son had earned a place in the pre-med program. Getting into medical school was another universe of challenges. His classmates were mostly rich kids from expensive private schools with doctor or CEO parents. Ethan was the poor kid from the neighborhood with Down syndrome who arrived by bus after a 2-hour commute. The first few months were tough. Some professors clearly doubted his capacity. Some classmates made nasty comments in the hallways. But Ethan had a weapon they didn't expect. He was better than all of them. In the first midterms, he got the highest grades in the group. In presentations, he demonstrated such deep knowledge that he left even the doctors wide-eyed. In clinical case discussions, he was always the first to find the correct diagnosis. Within a year, he went from being the guy with Down syndrome to the genius of the class. The same classmates who mocked him at first now asked him for help studying. The same professors who doubted now invited him to research projects. I kept working hard to help pay for his expenses. It was a public university, but there were costs for books, materials, transportation. Ethan got a scholarship, but we were still tight. I cleaned, cared for elderly people, took any honest job that came up. My body couldn't handle the pace of 20 years ago anymore. My hands were constantly swollen from arthritis from so much heavy cleaning. My back was killing me. I took painkillers daily just to keep going. But seeing my son in his white coat, with the stethoscope around his neck, made any pain worth it. In his 3rd year of med school, Ethan decided to specialize in pediatrics. "I want to take care of kids like me, Mom," he explained. "I want them to know they can be whatever they want regardless of any diagnosis." That was when he started doing his rotations at the University Medical Center, the most important hospital in the city. He was in his final year when they offered him a residency right there in pediatrics, with a focus on genetics and development. "It's the best residency program in the state," he told me euphorically. "If I manage to get in, I'll be able to specialize exactly in what I want." He passed the residency exam in first place. First place, among more than 200 candidates. The boy rejected by his own father for having Down syndrome was now the most brilliant medical resident at the General Hospital. When he received his lab coat with the name embroidered Dr. Ethan Sanchez, pediatric resident, I cried again. 24 years of struggle, sacrifice, sleepless nights, heavy labor. It had all been worth it. My son had become a doctor, and not just any doctor. With barely 2 years of residency, he was already recognized as one of the most brilliant minds in the hospital. He published articles in major scientific journals. He gave talks at national conferences. They invited him to be part of the genetic research team. At 26, he was promoted to chief resident of pediatrics. The boy the world said would achieve nothing was now commanding a team of 15 doctors, all older than him, all normal, all looking at him with respect and admiration. It was around that time he insisted on buying me a house. "Enough renting, Mom," he said seriously. "You worked your whole life for me. Now it's my turn to take care of you." I tried to refuse. I told him to save, to invest in his future, but Ethan didn't take no for an answer. He bought a simple but comfortable house in a quiet suburb, furnished it completely, and forced me to stop working. "Your days of scrubbing floors are over, Mom," he said, holding my calloused hands in his. "Now you're going to rest, take care of your health, enjoy life." In my mid-50s, for the first time since Ethan was born, I didn't have to worry about money. I didn't have to get up before dawn to catch the bus. I didn't have to scrub floors until my back screamed. I could simply be a mom without having to be dad, mom, provider, and therapist all at the same time. My new routine was waking up without an alarm, eating breakfast calmly, walking in the park, going to craft classes at church, simple things I never had time to do. Ethan insisted on taking me to regular medical checkups, caring for every detail of my health with the same zeal he cared for his patients. That's how we discovered I had high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and early osteoporosis, the bill for years of stress and hard labor. Ethan put together a complete treatment plan, hand-picked the best specialists, and personally reviewed every test. "You took care of me my whole life," he'd say. "Now let me take care of you." And so the years went by, me recovering from a life of struggle, him building a brilliant career. Finally, we were at peace. Finally, we could breathe without the weight of survival crushing us. Richard remained a ghost from the past. 18 years passed without a single word, without a sign of life, until that Tuesday morning at the county hospital. I was there because Ethan asked me to stop by to sign some papers for his health insurance, where he had listed me as a beneficiary. I arrived early, took a number, and sat down to wait. I was leafing through a magazine when I heard the commotion at the entrance. An older man ran in through the automatic doors, carrying a teenage girl in his arms. He was screaming for help. He was desperate. I looked up and my heart stopped. Although older, thinner, more hunched over, I recognized that face. It was Richard. He didn't see me at first. He was too focused on getting the girl attended to. But when the nurses rushed the girl into the ER, he turned around and our eyes collided. I saw the shock on his face, the delayed recognition, and then that smile I remembered as well. He walked toward me with clumsy steps, clearly shaken, but trying to maintain that arrogance of old. "Linda," he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like poison. What a surprise. I didn't answer him. I just held his gaze. He was old, much older than 18 years should have made him. White hair, sagging and spotted skin. He looked sick, fragile, finished. "Working here?" he asked with that mocking tone. "Cleaning the hospital bathrooms? Now?" "I'm waiting for my son," I replied calmly. That was when he let out that bitter laugh and said the words I told you at the beginning. "Is that defective son of yours still alive? Or did nature finally do the job?" I didn't let him finish. "Ethan is doing very well. Thanks for asking," I said with a steady voice despite the anger burning inside me. "In fact, he works here." Richard laughed harder. "Works here doing what? Washing the instruments? Pushing gurneys? Oh, Linda, you were always good at inventing fairy tales to feel better about your failed decisions." At that moment, the double doors of the ER swung open. Out came Ethan in his impeccable white coat, the chief resident badge hanging around his neck, followed by 3 residents writing down every word he said. He was explaining something about a protocol using complicated medical terms with that natural authority of someone who knows what they're doing. The residents listened intently, asking questions he answered with patience and precision. Ethan saw me in the reception area, and his face lit up with that big smile that always melted me. He excused himself from the residence and walked toward me. "Mom," he said, hugging me. "Sorry for the delay. We had an emergency in the pediatric ICU and they needed my assessment." It wasn't until he released me from the hug that he noticed Richard standing next to me, mouth open, pale as a ghost. "Everything okay, Mom?" Ethan asked, noticing my tension. "Is this man bothering you?" I was going to answer, but Richard stepped forward with a trembling voice. "Ethan?" My son looked at the older man with a neutral, professional expression. There was no recognition there, just the automatic courtesy of a doctor dealing with a patient's family member. "Yes, I am Dr. Ethan Sanchez. Are you a relative of the patient who just was admitted?" he asked, pulling out his tablet to check the file. I am your father," Richard said with a broken voice. The silence that followed felt eternal. Ethan stopped typing on the tablet and looked up slowly to look at Richard. His face remained neutral. But I knew my son. I knew every gesture. I saw the old pain waking up, but I also saw the strength he had built over the years. "No, sir," Ethan said with a calm but firm voice. "You are not my father. My father died before I was born. You are just the man who abandoned my mother and me 18 years ago because I wasn't perfect enough for you." Richard recoiled as if he had been slapped. "Son, Dr. Sanchez," my son corrected, "and I am not your son. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to know your relationship to the patient who just came in so I can treat her properly." A nurse approached with a folder. "Dr. Sanchez, patient Vanessa, 12 years old, admitted with seizures and high fever. The father reported a history of seizures since she was 6 months old. We need your urgent assessment." Ethan grabbed the folder and started reading. I saw his face change, the professional expression giving way to real concern. He looked at Richard. "Are you Vanessa's dad?" he asked. Richard just nodded his head, unable to speak. "Come with me," Ethan said, walking toward the ER. "I need the complete history of her seizures. When did they start? How often do they happen? How long does each crisis last? What meds is she taking?" I stayed there standing, watching them walk away. Richard turned back once looking for me, but I turned away. He didn't deserve even that from me. I sat down again and waited. I knew Ethan would take a while. He always took his time with every patient, especially if they were children. I grabbed my phone and pretended to be busy, but my mind was racing at 1,000 miles an hour, processing the absurdity of it all. The man who abandoned us now depended on the son he rejected to save the daughter he decided to love. The irony was so perfect it seemed like a movie script. 2 hours passed. Finally, Ethan came out of the ER looking tired but satisfied. He sat next to me. "How are you?" he asked quietly. "I should be asking you that," I replied, grabbing his hand. He sighed deeply. "Vanessa is stable. It was a seizure caused by a high fever due to an infection. I prescribed antibiotics and anticonvulsants. She's going to stay admitted for a few days for observation." "And him?" I asked without saying the name. "He's desperate," Ethan said. "His daughter has severe epilepsy. Apparently, she's been hospitalized a bunch of times." He showed me a folder full of studies, diagnoses from various specialists. It seems no doctor has managed to control her seizures completely. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction. I wanted to see it as divine justice. The man who rejected a son over genetics now had a daughter with a serious neurological problem. But the bigger part of me, the part Ethan taught me to nurture over the years, only felt sadness for the innocent girl suffering. "What are you going to do?" I asked him. "My job," he answered simply. "I'm going to take care of Vanessa as best as possible. She's not to blame for who her dad is, and I didn't become a doctor to choose who I help based on grudges. My son, always so full of integrity, always better than any of us deserved." The following days, Vanessa remained hospitalized, and Ethan handled the case personally. He ordered a complete battery of tests, consulted with other specialists, reviewed the entire history. I knew he was doing it not for Richard, but in spite of him, Richard tried to approach Ethan several times, waited for him in the hallways, tried to make small talk beyond medical stuff, but Ethan maintained an impeccable professional distance. He answered what was necessary about the treatment and left it at that. It was on the 4th day that Ethan made a major discovery. He was reviewing Vanessa's old scans when he noticed something the other doctors had missed. "Mom," he called me that afternoon with an excited voice, "I think I found the root cause of Vanessa's seizures." She has a small malformation in the temporal lobe that the others didn't see because it only shows up on a specific type of MRI. If I'm right, there is a surgery that can eliminate her seizures completely. That's wonderful, I said. Are you going to tell him? There was a pause. Yes, because it's the right thing to do. That night, Ethan summoned Richard to his office. I wasn't there, but Ethan told me later. He showed him the scans, explained the finding, detailed the operation and the chances of success. Richard listened to everything in silence, tears streaming down his face. When Ethan finished, Richard just said, "Why?" "Why what?" asked Ethan. "Why are you doing this? After everything I did to you and your mom, why do you care about helping my daughter?" Ethan told me he stayed silent for a moment, searching for the words. Then he said, "Because I am not you. You abandoned a son because of a genetic condition. I am not going to abandon a patient because of who her father is. Vanessa deserves the best treatment, and I'm going to give it to her. Not for you, but for her." Richard tried to say more, to apologize, but Ethan raised his hand, stopping him cold. Richard, I understand this is difficult, but I want to make it clear that our relationship begins and ends in this hospital, with your daughter's treatment. I don't want your apologies. I don't want you trying to reconnect. I have a wonderful mother who was dad and mom to me my whole life. I have a full and happy life. You are part of my DNA, but you are not part of my story. I hope you can respect that. They scheduled Vanessa's surgery for the following week. Ethan wasn't going to operate. He was a pediatrician, not a neurosurgeon, but he would coordinate the entire team and be glued to the process. I went to the hospital on the day of the operation, not to see Richard, but to support my son. I knew that however professional he was, the situation shook him. I found Richard in the waiting room, alone. He looked different, more hunched, more fragile, more scared. When he saw me, he stood up slowly. "Linda," he said with a hoarse voice, Can I talk to you? Please." Every fiber of my being wanted to tell him to go to hell. I wanted to turn my back and leave like he did 18 years ago, but I remembered what Ethan said about not being like him, about being better. I took a deep breath and nodded. We sat apart. He looked at his trembling hands before speaking. "I don't even know where to start," he said. "Asking for forgiveness sounds like so little for what I did." I didn't answer, just waited. "When Ethan was born, I panicked," he continued. "All I saw was the syndrome, the difference, the what will people say. I couldn't see beyond that. And I was too much of a coward to admit the problem was in me, not him." "You're right," I said. "Forgiveness isn't enough." He nodded, crying. "I threw away the best thing that could have happened to me. I had a second chance with Vanessa. I thought I could be the dad I wasn't for him, but life has a very dark sense of humor. Vanessa was born with severe epilepsy. And do you know what my first reaction was? Panic again. Fear again. I almost made the same mistake twice." "But you didn't," I said coldly. "No, because my wife wouldn't let me. She told me if I abandoned the girl, she would leave me. So I stayed. I learned. I learned to love beyond limitations, but it was already too late for Ethan." "Too late," I confirmed. When I saw him there in his white coat, they call him Doctor, commanding the whole team. Linda, I couldn't believe it. How is it? How is it that a boy you called defective became a brilliant doctor? With hard work, I completed his sentence. With determination. With a mother who never doubted him. With therapies, stimulation, quality education. With unconditional love, everything you didn't want to give him. He sobbed, covering his face. I looked at that broken man, and I didn't feel pleasure. I felt nothing. Emptiness. He no longer meant anything to me. Not anger, not hate, not a desire for revenge. Pure indifference. "Ethan is an incredible man," I told him. "He has saved the lives of hundreds of children. He publishes research that is changing how medicine treats these conditions. He is respected, admired, loved. And he achieved all that not thanks to you, but in spite of you." Richard lifted his face full of tears. "I know. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve to even speak to him. But I need you to know that I regret it every day. Every day I see Vanessa, and I think of him, of what I lost, of who he became without me." "Well," I said, standing up, "I hope that regret accompanies you the rest of your life. I hope you never forget that you abandoned a perfect son because you were too imperfect to see past your own nose." I was turning to leave when he called me again. "Linda, wait. My wife left me 6 months ago. She met someone else, took everything in the divorce, the house, the car, the savings. I live in a tiny apartment, barely making ends meet. They canceled Vanessa's insurance because I couldn't pay. She's getting treated here through Medicaid or whatever charity care they have now. I lost everything." He expected pity. He expected me to feel something for him, but I only felt more emptiness. "You know what's funny?" I said. "I raised Ethan without a home of my own, working 3 jobs, living in attic rooms, eating the basics. We had nothing, but we had love, we had purpose, we had each other. You had everything material, and you lost it because you never knew how to value what matters. I don't pity you, Richard. You are reaping exactly what you sowed." This time I left without looking back. Vanessa's surgery lasted 6 hours. It was a success. Ethan came to give me the news with a tired face, but happy. "She's going to be okay," he said. The neurosurgeon removed the entire malformation. The probability of her having seizures dropped to less than 5%. She'll be able to live a normal life. I hugged my son, feeling pride swell in my chest. "You saved her life." "We saved her," he corrected. "I just saw the problem." The whole team pulled together, always so humble, always sharing the credit. Vanessa was discharged a week later. The day she left, Richard tried to approach Ethan again, to thank him exaggeratedly, to create some bond, but Ethan only shook his hand formally, wished the girl a good recovery, and said goodbye. Just like that, no drama, no malice, but without opening the door. I thought that was the end of the road, that Richard would go with his cured daughter and we would go back to our lives. But fate had other plans. 3 months later, I was at home when Ethan arrived from work earlier than usual. He had a strange look on his face, not happy, but not upset either. It was somewhere between surprise and disbelief. "Mom, I have to tell you something," he said, sitting on the sofa. "What happened? Is everything okay?" "Richard looked for me today at the hospital." I tensed up. What did he want? Ethan sighed. He said Vanessa is wonderful, not a single seizure since the operation, and he wants to make a donation to the hospital. A large donation. "Donation?" I repeated, confused. "But you said he was broke." He was, but apparently he sold a piece of land he had kept, some family inheritance, and he wants to donate all the money to create a research fund for childhood epilepsy at the hospital. I didn't know what to say. That's unexpected. "There's more," Ethan continued. "He wants the fund to be in my name. He said he wants it to be the Dr. Ethan Sanchez Fund for Research in Childhood Epilepsy. Did you accept?" I told him I'd think about it, that I had to talk to you. We stayed silent. It was a lot to process. The man who abandoned us now wanted to immortalize the name of the son he rejected in a medical fund. "What do you think, Mom?" asked Ethan. "Do you think it's genuine, or just guilt trying to buy forgiveness?" I thought about it carefully. I think it can be both. It can be guilt and still be genuine. The question is, will this do you good or harm? Ethan sat thinking. "You know what's weird? I don't feel anything for him. Neither anger nor resentment. He's like a stranger, someone who is biologically connected to me, but emotionally is a zero. But the money, I insisted. That money can help a lot of kids." "Yes," he agreed. "And that's why I'm thinking of accepting. Not for him, but for the kids." And that's what he did. He accepted the donation on the condition that Richard understood this changed nothing. It was a medical act, not an emotional bond. They created the fund with fanfare. The hospital held a ceremony, invited the press, the whole show. Richard was there trying to look important, to hang on to Ethan's light a little, but the one who shined was my son. He gave an impressive speech about the importance of research, about how every child deserves to live without limitations. He spoke of Vanessa and how medicine changes lives. He didn't mention Richard once, and that, in a way, was the best revenge, making the man irrelevant in his own story. After the ceremony, at the reception, I saw Richard approach Ethan. I moved close to hear. "Ethan," he said hesitantly. "I know this doesn't change anything. I know I have no right to ask. But do you think one day, maybe we could?" "No," Ethan interrupted him, polite but firm. Mr. Richard, I appreciate the donation. It will help many, but that's where it ends. I have a family. I have a mother who sacrificed everything for me. I have friends, colleagues. My life is full. There is no hole that you can fill. Richard nodded slowly, defeated. I understand. I just wanted you to know that now I see it. I see how wrong I was, how extraordinary you are. I was always extraordinary, Ethan said without arrogance. Just as a fact. The difference is that you couldn't see beyond your prejudices. But that is your problem, not mine. I hope you learned something with Vanessa. I hope you are the dad to her that you couldn't be for me. And he turned and came toward me, offering his arm. Shall we go, Mom? I have an early shift tomorrow. We left together, leaving Richard behind once more, but this time it wasn't abandonment, it was a choice. The choice not to let the past embitter our future. In the car on the way back, Ethan looked at me and said, Thanks, Mom. For what? I asked. For never throwing in the towel on me. For never making me feel less. For teaching me that Down syndrome is a characteristic, not a definition. For teaching me that hard work and love can handle anything. My eyes filled with tears. You don't have to thank me for loving you, my son. It was the easiest thing I've ever done. It wasn't easy, he said. I know it wasn't. I remember you coming home dead tired. I remember you ate less to leave more for me. I remember you crying in secret. None of that was easy, Mom. But you did it. I'd do it all again, I told him, squeezing his hand. 1,000 times. We got home and did the usual. Him telling me cases from the hospital, me about the church group. It was simple. It was common. It was perfect. That night, before sleeping, I thought about the whole journey. 26 years since that day at the hospital when Richard looked at our son with disgust. 26 years of struggle. And in the end, the man who believed perfect genetics ensured success was alone and broken. The boy he rejected was saving lives and changing the world. Life gave everyone what they deserved. I closed my eyes and gave thanks. Thanks for the hardships that made us strong. Thanks for every tear. Thanks for every challenge that formed the man my son is today. And strangely, I gave thanks even for Richard. Because if he had stayed with his prejudices, he would have dimmed Ethan's shine. He would have spent years trying to fix something that was never broken. His abandonment, as much as it hurt, was the best gift he could give us. He gave us freedom to grow, to shine. The following months brought more recognition for Ethan. His research appeared in a top-tier international journal. They invited him to give lectures in other countries. But what made me proudest was how he treated his patients. One afternoon, I was in the waiting room when a young woman entered with a crying baby. The baby had Down syndrome. The mom was desperate, lost. Ethan attended to her personally. When she came out, she was a different person. She had tears, but tears of hope. She stopped to talk to me. That doctor, she told me, pointing to the office. He has Down syndrome, and he is a doctor. He told me my son can be whatever he wants. He showed me success stories. For the first time, I'm not afraid. I have hope. I almost exploded with pride. That was what it was about. Ethan wasn't just saving lives. He was changing mentalities, breaking barriers. He became a symbol. He started giving talks at schools, support groups, always with the same message. The limitation is in the head of the one who underestimates, not the one who is underestimated. A journalist asked him for an interview to tell the story of the doctor who defeated Down syndrome. Ethan accepted, but with one condition. I didn't defeat Down syndrome, he explained to her. I have Down syndrome, and I always will. It's part of me. What I defeated was prejudice, low expectations. Those are the real disabilities not being on my extra chromosome, but in people's mindsets. The report came out beautiful. It went viral across the U.S. Letters arrived from everywhere, and you know who saw the report? Richard. He called the hospital, asking to speak with Ethan. My son didn't return the call. Richard insisted for weeks. He even tried to go, but security didn't let him pass. That was when he found me coming out of the pharmacy older, more desperate. Linda, please, he pleaded. I just want to talk to him for 5 minutes. He doesn't want to talk to you, Richard. Accept it. I saw the report. I saw what he became. I need to tell him I was wrong, that I'm sorry. You already said that many times. Apologies don't change the past. I know, he almost shouted. But I need to try. I need him to know I regret it daily. I looked at that man and felt nothing, not even pity, just exhaustion. Richard, you want forgiveness to feel better yourself, but forgiveness isn't about you, it's about the one you hurt. And Ethan doesn't need to forgive you to move on. He already overcame this. You are a ghost he decided to leave behind. And you? He asked. Do you forgive me? I thought about all the nights I cried alone. The hunger, the back pain. No, I told him. I don't forgive you, but I don't hold a grudge either. You simply don't matter anymore. You are irrelevant in my life and in Ethan's. And I think that's worse than hate, isn't it? I left him there and walked away. And that time, I closed the chapter forever. Another year passed. Ethan turned 28. We had a party at the house. In the middle of the party, he pulled me aside. Mom, I want to give you something, he said, handing me an envelope. They were the deeds to the house in my name. Ethan. You didn't have to. Yes, I did, he interrupted. You deserve security, Mom, to never lack a roof over your head. This house is yours. I cried like a baby. 28 years ago, I was on the street with an infant. Now I owned my home. There's more, he said, smiling. I met someone. What? A doctor, Fiona. She's a cardiologist, Pediatrics. She's incredible, Mom. And she sees me, you know? She doesn't see the syndrome. I laughed and cried at the same time. My baby was in love. Is she at the party? I asked, blushing. The one in the blue dress. I saw her. She was laughing with people. She looked like a good person. Does she know everything? I asked. About Richard? Yes, I told her. She said that only proves how strong I am. I met Fiona, and she was a sweetheart. Most importantly, she looked at my son with real love. They dated for 2 years and then got engaged. The wedding was scheduled for the following spring. A week before the wedding, Vanessa, Richard's daughter, called us. She was 15 and calling in secret. Dr. Ethan, she said nervously. It's about my dad. He's very sick. Pancreatic cancer. He's dying. He says he needs to make peace before going. Ethan looked at me. I just told him it was his decision. Vanessa, he said. I'm very sorry, but I don't know if I can give him what he wants. I understand, she said, crying. I just wanted to thank you. You saved my life, and despite who my dad is, you never treated me differently. You don't have to carry your father's mistakes, Ethan told her. After hanging up, he sat thinking. In the end, he decided to go. Not for Richard, but for himself, to close the loop. I went with him. Richard was in a VA hospital or maybe a state facility, in a shared room. He was skin and bones, yellow with jaundice. You came, he whispered. I came, said Ethan from a distance. For Vanessa, I didn't expect you to come. I didn't come to make your death easier, said Ethan. I came to say some things for me. Richard nodded. I could tell you I forgive you, but it would be a lie. I don't forgive you. Not for what you did to me, that's in the past, but for what you did to my mom. You left her on the street with a newborn. You forced her to break her back. She sacrificed her life for me, while you lived your perfect life. Richard was crying. I know. That's why I can't die in peace. And you shouldn't, said Ethan. Carry that weight until the end because actions have consequences. I just wanted you to know, said Richard, that now I see. I see that you are extraordinary, that I was blind. I missed out on knowing an incredible son. You're right, replied Ethan. You missed everything. My first steps, my graduation, my life. And the saddest part is you didn't miss it out of obligation, but by choice. But I thank you for one thing. If you had stayed, you would have poisoned my childhood. Your abandonment set me free. I don't deserve forgiveness, whispered Richard. No, but I'm going to give you something better. Indifference. You no longer take up space in my heart, and I'm going to live my happy life without looking back. Oh, and I'm getting married next week. And if I have children, they will only know one grandfather. Javier, my real dad. Even though he died before. Because a father is the one who raises you, and you were never my father. We left there. In the hallway, Ethan took a deep breath. I'm free, he told me. Richard died 3 days later. Ethan sent flowers out of courtesy to Vanessa, but he didn't go to the funeral. On the wedding day, the church was full of love. Fiona looked beautiful, and when it was time for the groom to enter, there was no dad. But there was Mom. I walked with him to the altar, with my heart exploding. In his vows, Ethan turned to me. Before promising love to Fiona, I have to thank my mom. Mom, you taught me what unconditional love is. You taught me that the only real disability is the lack of love. Everything I am is because of you. No one could stop crying. At the reception, watching my son dance the waltz, I thought about how far we came. Life has those ironies. The man who abandoned us died alone and full of regret. And we, the defective ones, built a life full of love and success. Today, at my 63 years, I tell you, every tear was worth it, and if I could turn back time, I wouldn't change a thing, because every challenge formed the extraordinary man my son is. If this story touched your heart, leave me a like. Tell me in the comments what country you're watching us from, and if you ever had to prove your worth when they doubted you. And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe right now. Every week I bring real stories. Hit the bell icon, and if you want to support the channel more, become a member. A kiss to everyone's heart, and remember, never let anyone define your worth.